Welcome to Tech Voices. My name is Drew Bond, and I'm the president and CEO of C3 Solutions, and this is Tech Voices. C3 Solutions is a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to promoting free market solutions to our world's greatest climate, energy, and environment challenges. You can learn more about us at c3solutions.org and subscribe to our free online newsletter at c3newsmag.com. Today's special guest is Eddie Badrina. Now, Eddie is a friend. Eddie is CEO of Eden Green Technology. Eden Green produces vertical farming technology that helps countries, cities, and businesses around the world sustainably grow large amounts of food using less land, less water, and less energy. Eddie, it is so good to see you today. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Drew.
Yeah, it's our real pleasure. There's just so much happening in this space. I can't wait to get right into the whole topic of vertical farming. But before we do that, Eddie, tell us about you. How did you get into this business? What's your background?
Oh gosh, I have no background in ag. I do have a background in tech, but really, I came from an entrepreneur standpoint. So, uh, spent some time in Washington D.C., where you are, both pre and post 9/11 in the foreign policy space, but really got a strategic sense from there, for my 6 years there, of just the scope of the needs around the globe, and then how that affects us locally, and how we can affect that locally. So, after time in DC, came back to Texas, Dallas in particular. I started a company that was focused on digital marketing and ad tech, and grew that from scratch. Bootstrapped it, no loans, no lines of credit, 2010, all the way to being acquired in 2016. So really got a sense of how to grow a business, how to scale a business, how to create culture and a team. And then had a chance to buy it back 11 months after we sold it. So bought it back, and then just recently sold it, probably a year ago, again for the second time. So I've got these sort of significant chapters in my life. One of which is in government, the second which is as an entrepreneur, and then this third chapter is, I would say, is a culmination of those first two, which is while I was running, and my business partner and I were running this previous company of mine. I was kind of, honestly, I was just dissatisfied. I had been there, done that, and gotten the M&A T-shirt for professional services, and so I just wanted to do something else. I felt like my life was, and my calling was somewhere else. And so during that time, I just had a chance to step back and, with friends and family, articulate what I wanted to do. And I think that's really important for your listeners, wherever they are in vocation, wherever they are in leadership, management. Knowing what you want and clarifying what you want is probably the single most important thing you can do for yourself, for your career, for your own personal life. But I clarified three things that I wanted to do. I wanted to run a hardware software company. I wanted to have an exponential impact. So for every 1 unit of effort that I put out, I wanted to have a 10 to 20x return on culture and society around me. And then the third is I wanted to run what's known as a redemptive organization. You can read about it more at praxislabs.org, which is an organization up in New York City. But it really espouses a certain type of company and nonprofit, or nonprofit, that is redeeming and restoring to the society around it. So with those, armed with those three kind of checkpoints, I just kind of socialized it among friends and family, asked them for their advice, their insights, and lo and behold, this opportunity came up through one of my colleagues, and he said, "Hey, you should really take a look at this company. Great mission. They need help with their vision. They need help with product market fit, go to market strategy, sales strategy. Basically, they need help scaling up, growing and scaling this business, and turning this technology into a product that can be sold." So that's what I did. Jumped on in late 2019, 4 months before the pandemic hit. Had a chance to just retool and regroup the company, and here we are 2.5 years later.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations. I mean, what an incredible background. I love the story of how built and sold and then bought and resold again a company. I mean, it just shows the the perseverance and just the resilience. And as you noted, you came to this opportunity before the pandemic and have lived to tell about it. And you guys are in a point where you're really starting to thrive. So it's just amazing journey. So congratulations for that. So for our listeners, I mean, there's so many different ways that I could go on that background, because I love the three things that you're focused on and the way that you went through that process as a startup and the redemptive nature of your company. But tell us about Eden Green. What is Eden Green? You're in the vertical farming space. I know that, but for our listeners, give us a background on even where did the name come from? That probably has some importance, and then help us understand what the product is in your market.
It does. So Eden Green was actually started by two South African brothers, and they were both engineers, but mechanical construction are engineers. But they were feeding their community around them, and this in Johannesburg, and they had this opportunity to feed kiddos and just do bounce houses and candies and just sort of this community, carnival type event. But they saw this 5-year-old kid stuffing his pockets with candy, and they said, "Hey, slow down. No need to hoard. There's more where that came from." And they asked his teacher, like, "Hey, what's his scenario? What's his situation?" And the teacher said, actually, he's doing that because it is not his day to eat. It's his 3-year-old sister's day to eat. And so he's bringing candy back home to her as her meal for her day to eat. And so for most people, that would, pull a heartstring, and they would, think about it and pray about it. And these guys were just like, man, we need to do something about it. So they went back and literally in their garage started thinking about and developing this prototype for what it would look like if you could grow greens as they looked like in the Garden of Eden. And that's where the name Eden Green came from. So it's turned into this company where we have this technology which is patented here in the US and in the EU and abroad on how to grow vertically, but within a greenhouse. So that sounds really simple, but actually it is, but it's so complex at the same time that it's patented. Like no one else can do what we're doing. Most of our peers are growing in greenhouses, right? So flat tray automated greenhouses. They use all the elements of, and the benefits of sunlight. So there's a lot of energy efficiency. And they grow in hydroponic media. The problem is it requires vast amounts of land. Most of the greenhouses that you'll see these days, in order to get investor grade sort of margins or returns, they've got to build in 60 to 120 acre increments. That's a lot under one roof. It's a lot of space. So the problem with that is right now we have a supply chain problem, wherein 90% of all produce, or greens rather, are grown in the US, are grown in California, Salinas Valley, California, and in Arizona. So on the East Coast where you are eating a 3,000-mile salad every day. I'm eating a 1,500-mile salad. That's just not sustainable financially with supply chain and trucking problems, and then environmentally. So greenhouses, while they are more efficient than the farmland out in California, save less water. I mean, they use less water, use less land, have a lot less waste. The reality is those greenhouses are still huge, and they don't solve the supply chain problem. You still have to truck them from hundreds of miles away. And then they don't solve the workforce problem, because they have to build these huge greenhouses in rural areas where the land's cheaper. Well, you can't find the people to work there, right? So efficient, but huge. And on the other end, you've got indoor farms, which we've all seen in the news. The indoor farms have huge CapEx costs. They run millions of kilowatt hours worth of light electricity. And so while they are dense and can be put next to distribution centers and populations, they're just too expensive. They can't grow what people want to eat in mass, right? So you'll see, as a result, you'll see a lot of indoor farms focusing on two things: strawberries and tomatoes, because they're high volume, like high weight and high margin. So that's a problem, because the vast majority of people don't just eat strawberries and tomatoes, right? They've got to eat greens, arugula, kale, spinach, lettuce. Lettuce alone is an $8 billion industry here in the US, growing 10 to 15% year over year. So that's what we're focused on. If we can combine the efficiencies of greenhouses with the verticality and density of indoor farms, what you get is a very cost efficient and very profitable greenhouse unit, an economic unit that then makes sense to sell affordable, nutritious, consistent, locally grown greens and produce right next to distribution centers, right next to population centers.
Yeah. I mean, it's just fascinating. So again, in so many questions, I mean, it reminds me of sort of the energy space and that, energy has gotten, centralized and,
Yeah.
big, right, industrial scale. And yet now we're starting to move towards more of a decentralized model,
Mm-hmm.
but backed up by that centralized nature. And from a ag standpoint, I can think of plenty of just the history of how farming has gone from so many people and so many farms to now just a few people really relatively and a few
Right.
farms. But now, to your point, what you guys do is actually help distribute that in a more kind of maybe logical way to cut the costs of the transportation down the supply chain. Um, but I would imagine that comes with some challenges. I mean, what are the challenges that you face from a technological standpoint? I mean, you said, obviously greenhouses are proven, but you have a unique technology that's
Mm-hmm.
patented. So,
Yeah.
what is unique about that? And help us understand how it really is that different from, say, and I'm a novice at this, right? But so the
Sure.
other indoor sort of vertical type farms I can think of tend to be like a shipping container.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so are those the types that you're saying, those really are yet to be proven, and require a lot more water and energy, whereas yours doesn't because it's really more of a greenhouse. So help us understand that.
Yeah. So both greenhouses and indoor farms operate on flat sort of trays of greens, right? So if you think about, I mean, you can see the light here. If I put a tray right here and a tray on top of it, what do you see?
Yeah, it's going to shade the lower
It's going
tray.
to
Yeah.
shade it,
Yeah.
right? So, and then do that 36 feet up, 24 feet up. That is fundamentally while you cannot grow in trays within a greenhouse, right?
Yep.
So what do? Is they will say, well, we'll put it in a warehouse, we'll put it in a new build, some sort of existing shelf structure. We'll close it all off, and then we'll put lights under each of those, right? So there's lights that are shining on that. Uh, those lights you control the daily light intake of these plants, and that's all well and good, but you've got to run those lights. One, you've got to install those lights, and those lights are very expensive. And two, you've got to power them 24/7, right?
Yep.
So one, that's why it's, just the shadowing is why it's impossible otherwise than our technology to grow vertically within a greenhouse, right?
Yep.
So the greenhouses you'll see, they're 24 feet tall or 18 feet tall, but they're all one level, right? So they're working in square feet, whereas we're working in cubic feet. And compared to the indoor farms, we're working in cubic feet like them. But what we've done is basically take those and then turn it on its side. So now you see there's no shadow, right?
Yeah.
And to grow vertically like that with hydroponics is something that not a lot of people can do. You can do it at a small scale. People have seen tower gardens, right? That makes sense. You put them on your patio, put them on your porch, whatever the case may be. But to grow commercially where it looks the same exact every single time, to meet commercial specs is very, very difficult. And to do it year round and have it be food safe is just very difficult. And so that's the barrier to entry for our industry. So there's a capex barrier to entry, and then there's just a technological barrier to entry that has to be figured out. So as a result, we've got a number of peers and competitors but they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to figure out how to perfect their flat tray, I'll call them bunk beds worth of, right? Or even the walls worth of greens indoors. They're trying to figure out how to perfect that for strawberries and tomatoes because they have all these lights running in them. And we've seen ones. There's some folks who are ahead in the berries and tomatoes scene, but they grow really great looking berries, but they taste like cardboard. Right. So at the end of the day, you have to produce something that not only looks good, but more importantly, it tastes good. There's a lot of different factors for a customer to buy those things. Right. And
Yeah.
there's just, man, there's years worth of testing before they'll ever get that nailed down.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you guys are focused right now on lettuce,
Mm-hmm.
or I'll say leafy greens.
Yeah.
Um, is How big is that market? I think you gave us a number, but then,
Yeah.
what other markets can you expand into?
Yeah, so we are starting with lettuce and leafy greens because the TAM, total addressable market of lettuce, is about $8 billion alone in the U.S. The TAM
Just in the
on
U.S.
just in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah, the TAM on leafy greens is more like 12 to $15 billion. The last one I read on berries, on just berries in general, was about another $8 billion. So that's there are, and then tomatoes. I don't even know the tomatoes market.
Yeah.
So there are huge markets at play, right? And that's the great thing about it. There's so much. It's no pun intended. It's ripe for disruption. You've got a really old way of doing things, and it's not sustainable anymore. So people say, well, man, why would you do lettuce? It's so plain, it's so commoditized. It's because we can get really good margins, like investors are popping their eyes out margins on chopped and bagged lettuce. Why would you not do that? Right.
Yeah.
If you can make the margins work, go to where there's just a huge demand, and we can go into that existing supply, that existing volume, without having to create a new subcategory, if you will. Right.
Yeah.
So that's probably another differentiator between us and our competitors, is to make better margins. You want to have your own label, your own retail label, right? But in order to do that, you actually incur some pretty significant costs in terms of sales and merchandising, and just making your own brand. It takes time too. But what if your margins were so good, you could just do white label and private label and not even worry about your own brand,
Hmm.
right? How much cost savings would you have? You'd have you would have lower top line revenue, but your margins would roughly stay the same, and you wouldn't have to invest in additional sales, merchandising, and resources. Um, so that's what we've done. So I would say the last thing is, if you ever go to your produce section, look at the produce section and see how much of it is retail labels, really nice, fancy, high margin, right? Very high cost, premium, ultra premium stuff, and what's just generic, conventional, out, what we call wet wall. It's about an 80-20 split. All of our competitors are fighting over that 20, call it 20 to 30% of high priced, ultra premium stuff. We want to take the other 70%. Oh, and by the way, in an inflationary environment, guess what everyone's going to buy?
Yeah.
They're not going to buy the 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Just what an incredible market, as you said. I mean, it's not something that I, or maybe a lot of other people would think of as a big market potentially for margins, as you note. I mean, it just seems so commoditized. And I would imagine that, while on the one hand you're disruptive, on the other hand you're actually quite compatible. Even, I mean, if I'm a lettuce farmer in California, as you mentioned, where a lot of them are, or Arizona, um, I've got my old way of doing things, but there's a potential for me to actually help to start adopt your technology and integrate it into my own operations for my local markets there, and
Sure.
be somewhat hybrid. Is that the right way to think
Yeah,
about it?
we can absolutely do that. We'll absolutely partner with folks like that, who've got a built-in distribution system already, right? And they just want to change the way that they're farming.
Yeah.
The one thing I would note is that California market's huge, and they're going through a super drought right now.
Yep.
So for them to partner with us, and to be able to put one of our greenhouses there in their market, doesn't hurt them, because then they can free up those 40, 50, 60 acres that they would have devoted, or 100, or however many acres that they have devoted towards leafy greens or lettuce. They can redevote that to things that are more higher margin for them, right? Because right now, I mean, they're getting squeezed
Yep.
by water costs. They're getting squeezed by transportation and worker costs. So I look at it as like, I'm not replacing them. I want to have a comparative and competitive advantage to them, but there's going to be comparative advantages that a farmer has that we don't, like soil. Like they can grow orchards, they can grow root crops, they can grow grains that we just won't be able to grow in
Yeah.
our system. So we're not a silver bullet. We're part of the solution.
Gotcha. And so where are you on your technology development? Is it, how proven is it? How many operations have you scaled thus far? And how soon will we start seeing Eden Greens warehouses, if I can call them that, or what do you call them?
Greenhouses. They're
Greenhouses. That
greenhouses.
would make sense.
Yeah.
So greenhouses somewhere near me, or my friends in Texas or Oklahoma.
Yeah. So the technology is proven out. We've had great investor activity and just investment in our company. So we've got a 40,000 square foot pilot facility that we've been running for about 4 years, working out the tech, increasing our yields, right, to a point where the unit economics make sense from a business perspective. So we're about 3 weeks away from finishing out our 70,000 square foot commercial facility, our first one. And that is almost sold out, pre-sold. The harvests are going to a really, really big distributor partner of ours, as well as retail partners. So that's pretty exciting, which means we've got traction. And so we're actually starting construction on the next 2 greenhouses, which will also be here in Texas. It's just so happens that, we've been based here in Texas for a variety of reasons, one of which was capital and just investment opportunities, but also 2, we get all 4 seasons here in Texas. So if we can grow here, we can grow pretty much anywhere else, right? We've got freezes, we've got snow, we've got hail, we've got intense heat, wind, all of the above. So that's one of the reasons that we built here, is just to test out the resiliency of the platform.
Yeah.
So
who are your best customers? I mean, is it a grocery store? Is it a large distributor? Help us understand that.
it's a good question. So we've basically got two main with a third, I would say, in terms of sales channels. One is a distributor. We've partnered with a top 5 distributor in the United States of fresh produce, and we are they are distributing ours and packaging our greens for private label and white label for their customers, who happen to be grocers and then food service organizations, right? So on the grocery shelf, you'll see, like we said before, high-end premium retail brands. But then most, if not every grocer, if you went to a grocer association conference, wherever they are in Vegas or Chicago, and you said, hey, show of hands, who wants their own private label for their own grocery? Every single one of them will raise their hands. It's because the margins are better, right? So the problem is they're not farmers and they're not co-packers and distributors. So they ask distributors like our partner, hey, would you package and white label greens for us? And the answer is yes, we'll absolutely do that. So that's what we're fulfilling. We're filling these white label and private label brands, if you will, for retailers and food service organizations. And the second thing we're doing is these existing retail labels, the good ones, are running out of supply. They have all the demand. They've done a great job of selling and merchandising. They just don't have any more supply. So they're turning to us and saying, hey, can you grow supply for us? And we'll put it in our own packaging and sell it. And we're happy to be that way. And I think, it really dovetails with where you're at, probably where a lot of your audience is at, in that we want to be greenhouses infrastructure, right? It's a good analogy. No one, hardly anyone knows, except for those inside of the industry, where you get your power from. I
Yeah.
can guarantee you 99 out of 100 people do not know the name of their power plant. They just know they get it.
Yeah.
They know the distributor, right? Down here in Texas, it's Constellation, Encore runs the lines, yada, yada, yada. Everyone knows their distributor and who they buy their power from. But they are the broker, right? But they don't know the power plant.
Yeah.
That's the way we want to be. We want to be a power plant for produce, and then just let other people sell it and broker it.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love it. I just think, I mean, there's so much potential in addition to just your market if it were in a normal state. But to your point, we've got inflation, we've got, you know, record heat, droughts, you know, which puts pressure on water
Mm-hmm.
and energy resources. And so, you know, the idea of just being able to produce in a more efficient way is to me very conservative. You know, or you can call it
Yeah.
what you want, conservative, libertarian, free market. Maybe the folks on the left think it's a left thing, but you know, fundamentally, I think people in general want to leave things better than they found them. We always want to improve on whatever it is we're doing, and so I'm super excited about the innovation that you've brought to this space, and also the fact that you guys have kind of taken something very well known and proven, which is a greenhouse, and brought some additional innovation into that, into again a commoditized industry. There's so many analogies there that you could put on energy, but I won't waste our time on that now. Tell me about Eden Green and your investors. How much money have you guys raised to date? Are you trying to raise money now? When can folks out, and just like me, invest in the public market through help us understand where are you on your investment journey?
Sure. So right now in the company, we've got over 50 million invested in the company throughout the company's history. We're in a raise right now for approximately 100 million, and that'll build multiple facilities as we expand, right? And those facilities take 12 months to build. So it's this sort of time delay, right? It's just like infrastructure, right? It's like
Yep.
gas right now. Everyone wants a more gas in the system, and the reality is to power to build a new LNG plant or a refinery up, it just takes time, right? So there's a delay. So right now we are really just delayed by capital. Obviously a lot of the infrastructure funds and the institutionals want to see this new facility in action so that it can prove out the unit economics that we say we can do. But once that happens in the next, call it three months, 4 months, then I think we'll be raising significant amounts of capital to build more of these greenhouses. In terms of people wanting to invest, I think we'll have investment opportunities for private individuals, just as in the investment world, it's their SPV, special purpose vehicles, or sidecar deals, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Alongside these institutional investors that we're bringing on, and then one day I think we'll just have to expand so quickly that it'll be a natural phenomenon for us to look for some sort of public market offering.
All right, good. Well, I'll keep my eyes open for that. We're not here to endorse anybody from an investment standpoint. I want to make that clear, but I'm excited about where your company's going, and I know that you've fought hard to get where you are. I know you're a strong leader, and I think the best is yet to come for your company. So, is there anything else that we should know? Viewers and listeners should certainly know how to find you. What's your
Yeah.
web address?
So website is edengreen.com, like Eden, Garden of Eden, green.com. And then you can find out all about the company there. And then for me personally, it's just my last name, badrina.com, Badrina, badrina.com. And you can find out about my personal background and what I'm writing about, what I'm interested in on that.
That's great. Well, Eddie, thank you. Thank you so much for taking your time. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're busy building a company, and so thanks for giving us the opportunity to learn about what you guys are doing. And really hope the best success for you.
I appreciate it. It was a great conversation, Drew. Appreciate it
Yeah.
a lot.